Hi guys, it's Steph here, and I thought I would do a mid-September reading wrap-up video. If you've been following my booktube videos for the last couple of months, you'll know that I've been reading a ridiculous amount each month. And I did say at the start of this month that if I read maybe 7 or 8 books in the first half of the month, that I would do a mid-month wrap-up as opposed to an end-of-month wrap-up. So that's what I'm doing. I've read 10 books in the first half of September. Some of them are novellas. It's a bit, and if I keep reading the way that I've been reading, it will be a very long video at the end of the month, so let's get into it. The first book I read this month was a short story by Matthew Reilly. It is Jack West Jr. and the Hero's Helmet, which is a lead-in to Matthew Reilly's 4 Legendary Kingdoms, which is coming out very, very soon. So this is a short story. It's basically about how Jack West Jr., the main character in this series, gets his signature fireman's helmet, and it's set in New York. It's just a fun short story. It doesn't take very long to read. I think it's only about 20 pages long, and it's a non-stop action ride through the streets of New York City, as is how Matthew Reilly writes. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I love Matthew Reilly's writing. I know it's ridiculous and fun, and that's why I like it. So 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read at the start of September was Words in Deep Blue by Cath Crowley, which came in my YA Chronicles box last month. And I also got a second copy of this. This is happening quite a bit with my YA Chronicles books. I got a second copy from a student at work whose family is friends with Cath Crowley. So this is actually the copy that I got from my student because it is signed and personalised to me, which is really cool. I really love this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It's just a great contemporary YA read. The main character in it, Rachel, is coping with the death of her brother and having to move back to a town where she'd previously lived but left. And when she left a lot of things unsaid, unfinished, and unspoken. And she starts to work in the bookshop of her former best friend's family. It's a secondhand bookshop. They have a special part of this bookshop set aside for the letter library, and in it has copies of books that people aren't allowed to buy, but they can sit there, they can read them, and they can write in the margins, and they can write what those words mean to them. They can write letters to people and so on, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful book, and I loved it. So if you haven't read it, I highly recommend Words in Deep Blue. Okay, the next book I read in September, the start of September, was Skullduggery Pleasant Deathbringer, which is book 6 in the series. Obviously, I can't go into too much detail with it because it is in the middle of a series, and this series is all about magic and skeleton detectives, and there's different types of magic in this world. So if you haven't read this book focuses more on the group of necromancers and the legend of their Deathbringer, which has sort of been building up over the last couple of books. Yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I mean, I enjoy the series overall. Overall, it's fun. It's great to revisit the world of Skullduggery Pleasant and Valkyrie Kane, and I really enjoy doing that. Overall, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars because it is a series that I enjoy and it holds my attention, and despite being huge, I keep reading it. The next book that I read at the start of the month was Untamed by A.G. Howard, which is a collection of novellas set in the Splintered universe. There are 3 novellas in here. The first one focuses on Alyssa's mother and how she's coped with being reintegrated back into the real world and no longer being crazy or being thought of as being crazy. There's one story where Morpheus explores Jeb's memories and experiences in Wonderland while he's coming to grips with having to wait for Alyssa. The last story is how Alyssa has collected all these beautiful memories from her life and how she eventually returns to Wonderland. It was just fun to revisit this world. I love the Splintered series. I love anything that's Alice in Wonderland retelling. Alice in Wonderland itself I like, but I really love the retellings of it, so this was a really fantastic read. In the end, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It wasn't for every novella. I liked the last 2 a lot more than I liked the story of Alyssa's mother, but overall, it was a really great read and just great to revisit. Next, I read Initiate by Laura L. Fox, which I was kindly sent by Off Times Publishing for review in the lead up to its release. This was a really fantastic book. It was set in a really interesting environment. It's a science fiction young adult series, and it's set underground in the Antarctic. And basically, it's a group of people who are living underground because something's gone wrong on the surface, and this community has had to thrive and grow. And the main character, Riga, starts to feel a little bit uneasy, and she starts to notice things and that things aren't adding up to what they're being told. I honestly didn't know what to expect going into this read, and what I found as I was reading it was that you sort of start out thinking, oh yeah, this sounds sort of like it's science fiction, definitely. They're underground, they're living in a community, But as it goes on, it becomes more and more sci-fi. It was fantastic. It was exactly the kind of thing that I really like to read. And the world was so unique because it's not often that you read about characters having to live in close quarters underneath the ground. And this book, it's a short read. It's the first book in a series. By the end of the book, you're left knowing what's going to happen next because you've had all of these little tidbits leading up to it. And I can't really say much more than that because it's a bit spoilery. I do have a review. I did give it 5 out of 5 stars. It is an easy read. It is really fun. It's a great example of young adult science fiction, and I can't wait to read the next book. I really, really want to read the next book. Once I started reading, I couldn't put it down. So if you're curious to know more, check out my review down below. The next book I read was an e-arc. It was The Edge of Everything by Jeff Giles. This was a really great book. I really loved this book. It took me a while, I will admit, it took me a while to sort of get into the flow of reading it because it starts off very contemporary, and then once you get about a chapter into it, then it really twists, and it is a science fiction fantasy in the real world sort of book. So it is the story of Zoe and her struggle to keep living after her father has died, and she's living with her younger brother and her mother. And then one day they're caught in a massive snowstorm, basically, and Zoe's mother is caught down in the town. She can't get back up the mountain to the house, and Zoe's brother basically runs away in the snow, and Zoe has to follow him. And as they do this, they end up at a neighbour's house that's been abandoned. So they come across a really horrible man, and then they meet X, who comes out of nowhere and saves them. And it's the story of who X is, how his relationship with Zoe and how her relationship with him and the world around her continues to grow. And it was a really fantastic read. It was really fast paced once you get going, and you just wanted to find out what was going to happen next. Now, I'm not going to say too much about the world. I have got a review and I'll pop that down below, but there was some really interesting concepts in the world building here, and I really, really loved it. There's a love story thrown in, and that part, didn't thrill me, but everything else about the world building was really, really quite great. And I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars because I did really enjoy it, and I did want to find out what was going to happen next, and I kept reading. I couldn't put it down. Next book I read this month was City of Bones by Cassandra Clare, which is a very popular book here on YouTube. Everyone seems to have read all of Cassandra Clare's books. I've only read one. This one. I mean, it was okay. It wasn't the greatest read that I've ever read, and I've been reading some really great YA fantasy and science fiction this month, so this one sort of fell a little bit flat. I didn't find Clary to be super sympathetic. I gave this book 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was okay. I mean, the Shadowhunter realm, or the Shadowhunters idea, is really interesting and really curious, and I would like to see that a little bit more, so I will keep reading the series. My favourite character in this particular book was Magnus Bane, and he wasn't in it very much at all, so I'll probably keep reading to find out what happens next. But that said, none of the main characters really grabbed me as being terribly interesting, and some of them even made really ridiculous decisions, which irritates me a little bit. Seriously, can you make some sensible choices sometimes, please? The next book I read was The Reader by M.K. Harkins, and this is the story of 18-year-old Anne, who wakes up on a beach with no memory at all of who she is, where she is, or why she's there. She is approached by 2 young men, Devon and Archer, who are there to help her, but she doesn't know them, she doesn't remember them, and they take her to a safe place, and there she is introduced to their world and to the idea of the reader. Now, a reader is not only someone who reads books, they do read books, but they are someone who can also read people's thoughts and people's minds. It's a story of Anne discovering, how she fits into this world, what happened to her, who she is. Along the way, there's, of course, different factions of people who are at war with the readers. And yeah, so it's just a fun YA fantasy read. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and it was not a difficult read either. It was just quite an easy read it in one sitting sort of book. Next, I read Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Riggs. This book is being released as a movie at the end of this month, and so I wanted to read it before I was completely spoiled. And this book was not at all what I expected. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars because it totally surprised me. I thought it was going to be, look at the front cover. I thought it was going to be creepy. It wasn't creepy at all. It's the story of Jacob, who, after his grandfather's death, he goes in search of Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, which was a place his grandfather spent time in when he was younger during the war. It's, Jacob's story of how he finds these people that his father once knew and their peculiar abilities. It's a really fun read. It took me a while to get into the style of writing, and once I did, I just wanted to keep reading, and the photographs in it really lend itself to the story, and the characters are really, really quirky, and I really, really like them. And the other thing that I really love about this particular book or this particular edition of the book, is the aesthetics of it. This is not a huge book by any means, but it is a heavy book. The quality of the paper and the feel of the cover and the pages is just amazing, and I think having an aesthetic like that really lends something to the reading experience. So I really loved reading this, and I can't wait to read the next 2 books. The last book that I read this month was This Savage Song by Victoria Schwab. I did get this in my Outcrate box. I really enjoyed this book. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars as well. It is the story of Kate Harker and August Flynn, and it is a world of monsters and humans, and monsters are created every time a human commits a violent crime, or any time someone commits a murder, a monster is created, and it just sort of appears in out of thin air. This was a really interesting story. I think Kate was a really interesting character because she's not entirely sympathetic. You don't spend a lot of the start of the book feeling sorry for her, because she's trying to be this total badass, vindictive person and she's trying to get validation from her father for being this person, because that's the kind of person that he is. And then you've got August Flynn, who is a monster, and he's trying to be human. They meet, and the whole story unfolds about, this clash of personalities and this clash of ideologies. There's no romance in this particular book. There's definitely potential for it, but there's no outright romance. They go through quite a bit. And I mean, at the end, you feel so heartbroken for both of them. The idea of this world where violence breeds more violence is really, really fascinating. And I think Victoria Schwab did a really great job of writing that, and I really enjoyed her writing style. I haven't read anything by her previously, so I really enjoyed this. So that is everything that I read in the first half of this month. I still have a few things on my original TBR to get through, like The Passage by Justin Cronin and Empire of Storms by Sarah J Maas. I've also added a few other things to bulk that up for the rest of the month, and I've got a few e-arcs ready to read and review as well. I will pop any and all reviews I have done in the down bar below, so if you would like to check those out, you can head on over to my blog or to my Goodreads page. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them down below, or if you have any suggestions for any book talks that you would like to see, please leave them down below as well. I will catch you guys in my next video. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're having a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys next time. See you later.